Hello and welcome, everybody. My name is Anaka. I'm the programming director at AltF, and I'm very happy today to be discussing the film Covered in Mud, Buried in Myths by Shatabdi Chakraborty. This film was made possible by the AltF Mongabay India Video Reporting Fund. And I'm very, very happy today to be joined by the filmmaker Shatabdi and by Shaheen Butt, who runs the incredible production company Eternal Sunshine Productions and is a best-selling author. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us. Shaheen, so happy to have you.
Hi, Anaka. Thank you so much. I'm really thrilled to be on this panel today with Shatabdi Chakrabarti, an expert visual storyteller from Delhi. Shatabdi is invested in highlighting stories of lesser-known species, habitats, and indigenous communities. She has collaborated with National Geographic India, Discovery Plus, and others, and is currently working on investigative stories about illegal wildlife trade. Shatabdi, I have to say, I found the film a little difficult to watch, not because it's graphic, but because I guess it's talking about something that, is quite distressing. And I think it's, again, it was interesting to me that you think about the harm that, animals face. Traditionally, you think about tigers, you think about lions, you think about animals like that, you think about elephants for ivory. It didn't occur to me that myths and superstitions could contribute to a species being endangered and being at great risk. Could you tell us a little bit about what led you to this subject and what motivated you to tell this story, and how did you find it?
So thank you guys for making this happen, and it's really great to speak with you guys. So basically, I have been traveling to the hinterlands and going to the forest for like 15, 18 years now. And it was not just, going for wildlife safaris and, taking some good pictures. I was also deeply invested in meeting with the communities and trying to get to know the stories on ground, which are happening around these protected areas. So I was already aware in a lot of ways about, the kinds of threats that are happening at that grassroots level. And because my interest has always been to talk about or to work on stories which highlight the lesser known issues, the lesser known, habitats and species. So illegal wildlife trade was also something that I was parallelly, reading up on, doing research, trying to find connects and, access points with, let's say, researchers and scientists and even people who are involved in the trade on ground. I work a lot outside protected areas. So these people, the local villagers or the local people in that particular area become my source of information. So I was already aware that something like this is happening. And like you said that, when we talk about wildlife, there are these, glamorous species or these big species that are always in the foreground. But there's a lot happening behind the scenes. There's a lot happening outside the protected areas. We talk about, tiger conservation or elephant conservation, which are these flagship species. But India, like if you're talking specifically about India, there is a lot of trade happening, a lot of issues happening, which are interlinked with the smaller species, with the lesser known species which are data deficient. We have, as a country, we have such a huge biodiversity, our wildlife is as diverse as our people. So a lot of it goes, under the carpet. And because of, let's say, lack of information, lack of awareness, lack of resources, not a lot of on-ground work is being done, let's say, even to create awareness. So when this grant opportunity came about, I thought of, sticking to a story around my area. I live in Delhi, and I've seen, like, I've myself, like, let's say, been a part of the team which has kind of rescued red sand boas in NCR region. So we generally have the disconnect that, if anything about wildlife or conservation, it must be happening in the far-flung areas, in the forest or closer to forest. But the way our country is, it's all happening all around us. Even like you live in Bombay, you have leopards living in the middle of the city. So we are in this situation where we are in close contact with wildlife every day, every time, but they get kind of ignored. So that's why I thought of, pitching this particular story, because I knew that I had access to the trade happening over here, around here, and I'd already seen anecdotal evidences myself. So that was the reason why I pitched the story.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're right. I think this, you really don't think about, the threat that animals are under, again, in urban areas. Like you said, you really think about it from the perspective of it's happening in a forest or it's happening somewhere you don't have access to, or somewhere where it's challenging to actually, go in and intervene and change things. What were the challenges that you faced in telling this story, in making the film?
So one of the main focus points for the story was to just highlight the issue that this is an existing trade. Like we are talking about wildlife trade now. When you delve into the research aspect and you actually go into the rabbit hole of illegal wildlife trade, you won't believe the kind of animal parts or animals that are being traded, whether it's for pet trade or whether it's for something like this, which is completely based on superstitious practices. I always think that we have a lot of environmental issues that are misunderstood. So snakes, in a way, I really find them quite fascinating and cool to work with and to kind of just watch and observe. And here we have a species which is completely harmless. It is doing its role in the ecosystem. But because of stories and belief systems that we have created for our own, I don't know what benefit, the animal is paying the price for it. So when we started going deeper into the story, we kind of started figuring out that there are lots of layers to it. It's not only superstitions and myths. There's this whole rumor mechanism that has been created over the years, which has put a particular price on this animal, which is completely baseless. Nobody has made, no money at that level has ever been exchanged with this animal. But there's this whole thing that, oh, this animal sells in so much amount. So because of which people get very intrigued, and without knowing anything, they will, start picking up the snake. So there were lots of like related issues that we found. And I think one main challenge was to create the story in such a way that you highlight the main issues rather than, because there's so many things. There is another aspect of the snake being used for traditional medicinal practices. There's another anecdotal aspect, like anecdotal evidences of there being international cross-border trade of the snake happening. So we had to really narrow down on what are the main aspects. So, I mean, I think the first paper edit was really, really long, and the Mongabay team, they kind of did the brilliant work of chopping it down and keeping it very focused. Otherwise, the narrative could have really been here and there. So that was the main challenge, to have that clarity on, okay, if you're talking about the trade, then what aspect of the trade? If we are talking about superstitious beliefs, then to be very careful of not villainizing anyone, because this is something that is happening across the country. You can't say, oh, this area or this community. So these were, I think, for me, like a little bit of a challenge to put it all together in that narrative.
Can I ask, the rumor mill that you're talking about, is it fueled as well by the traders themselves? Because obviously, it's an industry for people who are actually trading in the animals. So is it fueled as well by the traders?
Yeah, so one of the forest officials with whom I spoke, he explained in length how the trade happens. So it is an organized crime at the end of the day. So what happens a lot of times, they work in a gang of 4-5 people. So let's say I meet someone and this particular person tells me that, oh, do you have this snake around your, farm? Do you know, I know someone who sold it for so many million rupees. So I will get a little bit like, oh, is that possible? So that is how this starts. So what happens is that this person will pick up the snake from its natural habitat without knowing anything about it, and then pass it on to this other person, who will then again get someone else conned, saying that, oh, if you buy the snake from me for let's say $50, you can sell it for $200. So the other person will then get duped. So this is how it keeps going on. So they are also a part of the whole system.
Shatabdi, everything that you've been saying, these 15, 18 years that you've spent out in the field working in this in this particular sector, I think we can go on talking for a very long time about it. I'm curious though, since it is so multifaceted, was there, and you have spent so many years exactly in the fields of conservation and illegal wildlife trade, working with communities, was there anything particular in this film, either ethics, which I think you touched on a little bit, or technical filmmaking aspects, anything new that you learned in this process?
I think so. Because of all the travels and all that time spent with our indigenous communities and in other places, I've always been collecting like anecdotal stories and anecdotal evidences of anything happening like this. So there was a lot of information already that I had gathered, but while diving deep into the research during prep and during scripting, it was very surprising that the trade exists in this extent. Like we as a country, we have some of the strictest laws for wildlife and protection of wildlife and natural resources. But even with all of these things in place, even with such great enforcement agencies in place, so much is happening. Like when some consignments of, illegal animal parts are being confiscated, I mean, that is just one little percentage of the entirety of it all. So that came as like a learning and as a surprise that there is a lot to kind of dig out in this whole specific wildlife trade.
Yeah, that's actually very difficult to hear and very sad.
Yeah.
Do you have any other story ideas in the pipeline? Are you planning to
Right
work?
now,
Yeah, sorry.
yeah, so right now I'm just prepping for a story on, utilizing of existing skill sets of indigenous communities and turning them into livelihood opportunities for them. So I'm working with an NGO which is working with indigenous. There's also parallel research going on around another illegal wildlife trade happening, which is going to be a long-term thing because it's quite vast. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine also it takes quite a toll on you as well to do this kind of research because it's a lot of distressing stuff to go through every day.
Yeah.
But no, thank you so much for making this film. I think what you said is absolutely correct. This is a very docile species. I think we have a tendency to think that I love snakes. Like personally, I love snakes. I think they're like really cool. But I think everyone just assumes if you see a snake, it's a poisonous snake. Same with spiders, like you assume spiders are going to bite you. And, we all know about the sort of all the superstition and the myths around sharks as well, things like that. I mean, I think this is something that we see, across the world with every species. So thank you so much for approaching it from this lens, because I think it's a really important, it's an important facet of illegal trade to highlight that this is also a contributing factor, myth and superstition.
Yeah. And I think what is misunderstood gets very easy to kind of just brand it a certain way. So we need to talk about, that this is nothing, it is baseless, it's completely baseless. So that awareness has to come. And we as a country, we have so many folklores and so many stories associated with the natural world. Like we can be a great example of living in like a beautiful harmony with the natural world. But our relationship has become very strange over the last how many decades. So yeah.
That's true. It does get distorted over time as well. Thank you so much for making this film, Shatabdi. I really hope that you continue, like more power to you. Keep going and keep making films in this arena. It's something that I think as a country we need to be talking more of and need to have more information. So I encourage everybody here to go ahead and watch this film and watch the other films as well that were part of the Alt-F and Mongabay India Video Reporting Fund. They're very, very important, crucial stories at this very distressing time in the climate crisis in our country. And on that note, I'd like to thank you, Shatabdi, for joining us. And thank you so much, Shaheen and Eternal Sunshine Productions, for continuing to highlight such important stories about biodiversity and climate.
Yeah, thanks for the support. I mean, this was possible because of the grant that you guys came out with. And Shaheen, thank you so much for the support. Yeah, means a lot.